charge here and leading our wonderful guests, thank you all for being here, through a bit of a guided meditation just so that I can relax. And so people will be in the right space to receive these messages.
Absolutely. One of the things that I think is really important when we have these hard conversations and we talk about really emotional topics is to make sure that we're in a place of safety. And it's the foundation of all of the healing work that I've done. And so what I want to do is to put everybody, because this is hard stuff, and it's very important that we bring our nervous systems to a calm place and find safety within ourselves, because so many of us have never experienced safety in our lives. Through our childhood, through experiences we've had, we don't even always know what that is. And true safety comes from deep within our inner self. And so what I would like to invite you guys to do is just to gently close your eyes. If you've never meditated before, just follow my voice. Don't expect to see any crazy things or anything like that. Just listen to my tones as I walk you through where safety truly comes from. So as you close your eyes, just take a deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. Deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. I want you to just feel your being, your beingness, your inner self, and just recognize where you are at this point in time. What your body is doing, if you're having an emotional response already, if your memories are surfacing, just acknowledge yourself. We all have been through all kinds of different experiences, and our loved ones, the people closest to us. And all of those experiences have taught us a lot about the world and ourselves. And it invokes emotion. It invokes all kinds of stories. It invokes our nervous system and all of our various body systems to fight, to try to keep us safe. So I want you to just really acknowledge your body and what it's feeling right now. Thank your body for showing you what's going on, and acknowledge that you're here and you're safe right now. Now I want to bring your awareness into your heart space, just the very center of your heart. And I want you to feel that heart space and know that the light within you starts in here. The spark of who you are. And if you haven't experienced true safety in this life, know that at one point in time, your soul did experience safety. And so what we're going to do is we're going to really try to find that again. So if you can imagine in your mind a door opening inside of the center of your heart. And what we're going to do is actually step through that doorway. And that door is going to take us to the place with a resonance of home. Our first spark of home. Whether that was source, light, the universe, God, whatever it is to you, your home. And as you step through that doorway, allow whatever comes through to come through. If you feel something, if you see something, or if nothing comes at all, just trust that that home is within you. And this is where safety truly comes from. Knowing that you've got you because you've always had you. And all of these things are here to teach us lessons and awarenesses, to help us grow, and to help us with the keys to help other people. everything we've been through, as hard as it all was, taught us something. It taught us what matters to us, what matters to our families, what matters to the world. It's given us purpose, and it's given us opportunity. And we're always safe as long as we stay true to ourselves and we trust ourselves first. You can visit your inner self, your home within yourself at any point in time in your day. Just remind yourself that you're here with you. And there's no need to come back out of this space because we bring safety with us. And we establish safety in everything we do once we know where it truly comes from. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. And we can begin.
Thank you. Thanks, Amanda.
You feel better?
I do.
Good.
So, in terms of safety
Yes.
and privacy, we do have a videographer here.
Yes.
And so I wanted to make sure that people understand that their privacy is our main concern.
Yes.
And that if people feel inclined to ask questions, to feel free because they will not be included in the video.
No.
And when the tracks are cleared, when the editing is done.
Yeah, we're not going to include anybody's personal stories, either voices or anything at all. The videographer is really here for the interview. If there are any answers that are general enough, we will potentially include them, but our goal is to not broadcast anybody's stuff.
So, on that topic,
Yes.
this has been broadcasted on many YouTube interviews. You said over 100,
I have probably been interviewed over 100 times, yes.
but never live.
Never in person.
In person
Yes.
live.
So this is the first stage.
You are the special audience. And we appreciate you being here because your energy helps us to deal with this topic.
Mm-hmm.
Your love and support. So I'm going to start with the back of the book, actually, on the back cover. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
So Amanda Quick is an author, mother, wife, quantum energy healer and coach, speaker, and spiritual channel. She is the founder of the Golden Haven Foundation, a non-profit organization with a mission to help people fighting for custody from their abusers and their children's abusers to create safety in all areas of their lives. When I met you and you shared your story, it took me several hours after meeting you to integrate how I felt about your bravery and about who you are as a woman and as a mother. Oh boy. I'm okay. And so I'm glad that you're getting the opportunity to share your healing, because as difficult a topic as this is, my preference for this evening and for this interview is to share how you've healed, what tools you used to wade through this darkness and this nightmare that could have and would have taken down really powerful people. Millions of women out there are dealing with this and do not know how. And I feel like the outcome for tonight, for me, my intention was to open the door, open this. I told my son today that we're going to blow the top off this Pandora's box. We're going to open up the dialogue, the conversation for people to talk about these things because it's rampant,
It is.
and because it's secret, and because it's filled with shame, guilt, fear.
Yes.
And I feel like you and I are both strong enough to address this topic and open the door for people to know who to talk to, including Sarah, healers, people who understand trauma. And so my intention is to have this reverberate out and have this ripple effect, open the door for thousands of people to start having this conversation, not secretly, openly, and to deal with the shame, the guilt, the fear, and the themes that are in this book.
Yes.
Would you care to share your intentions
Yes.
and the outcomes that you would desire?
Absolutely. So my intention is to be the invitation, because I went through something horrific and it could have broken me, but instead it fueled me to bring all of this out into the open and to help other people. And so I really want to be the invitation of possibility, because it was only 7 years ago that all this happened. And it's only been 3 years since we've been free from it all. And my life looks nothing like it used to. And so healing is not only possible, and doesn't have to take decades, it doesn't have to be lifetimes of repeated situations and relationships. It is possible to open the doorway to something completely different and to help other people along that journey. And so my intention is to be that invitation and to really help share what I did and what helped me get to where I am today.
Oh boy, that's juicy. I love the juicy bits. And I love the thing about healing.
Yes.
Because to me, the story is so painful that I need to see the light at the end of the tunnel. I need to know. And I think I may be the only person who ever sees this video who's been through not the same circumstances, but something similar. Certainly not sex trafficking, but difficult enough that it did break me. And so I remember the road back, and it took decades.
Yep.
And so I don't want other people to have to take decades to find the resources and to help themselves to create a new life. So and incidentally, have I mentioned yet that this all started in April of 2016?
Yes.
On a Tuesday.
Yes. Yes.
So the synchronicities of this whole thing coming together, I've only known Amanda for a month. And I met her while I was shopping, and about 10 days ago, my guides, my whatever you want to call it, said to me, contact Amanda, see if she's still in town. So I texted her and I said, are you still here? And she said, yeah, I'm still here. I said, how would you like to do an event? She's like, yeah. I said,
Here we are.
Okay. So I contacted the theater, and next thing I knew, in 10 days we were sitting here. So when the doors open, we march through.
Yes.
So I wanted to read the dedication. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
This story is dedicated to all those still fighting to create safety in their lives and the lives of their children.
Yes.
How would you like to address that dedication?
So for me, I know so many people who are sharing custody with their abusers and their children's abusers.
Say that again.
I know a large amount of people who are sharing custody with their abusers and their children's abusers. And they are fighting in the court systems unsuccessfully because of the way the system is set up. In the United States, it's the constitutional right to parent. I'm sure you guys have a version of that here in Canada. Is more important than the safety of the children.
Okay, so let's start at the end of the story. So in the end, after everything that you went through, you learned the tools necessary to, I'm going to say eliminate, but that might not be the right word. eliminate guilt,
Mhm.
shame,
Yes.
fear, self deprecation, and you put away your BB guns and got out your bazookas.
Yes. And the word I would use was I actually faced it. Didn't eliminate it, but I faced it.
Okay, so is that one of the tools that
It
you
is.
would teach people on how to step out of the mire, the muck, the knee deep?
Yes.
Okay, so
We need to acknowledge it. We need to recognize that those feelings are even present because so many people are so uncomfortable by it and so they hide.
So are you talking partly about your instincts, your gut instincts?
All of it.
All of it. How were your gut instincts in the beginning of all this?
In the beginning, I ignored all of them. I
Okay.
mean, I ignored them for the large portion of my life, honestly, because of what I was taught and the experiences I had. And I think that's the majority of people out there. They ignore those feelings, and they logic it away, or they follow what other people said, or he's a good guy and he's successful and all of the things.
What about the patterning to repair marriages and to just stick with it?
Yeah. And to
I
keep
made
families
vows,
together.
keep family together. I
Yes.
made vows till death do us part.
There's that. So there's that, and there's also my personal trauma, and I think a lot of people is about. I grew up in a fatherless household, and so my belief was that I needed to keep a father in my children's lives, no matter what. That was going to be the best thing for them, and I think a lot of women hold that. We have to keep the family together, and that means in the marriage. That means with the kids. That means all of it. And because of that belief, I didn't even see the red flags as red flags.
So that's a good starting place. So now let's go to April of 2016.
Yeah.
And I know you can't tell the whole story. Oh, and by the way, I don't know if people know this, but this is the only book that's been written on this topic.
Yep. Nobody has ever told the wife's story.
Nobody has ever told the wife's story, the person left holding the bag,
Yeah.
trying to protect the children, trying to rebuild your life. So take us to late April in 2016 on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
What happened?
So at the time, I was a full-time stay-at-home mom. I hadn't worked in 5 years. My kids were 1, 4, and 5. And who I was at that point in time was just mom, wife. My duty was to the household.
How old were you?
I was 28 years old, and so I had 3 kids, very young. And my husband at the time worked in IT. He made pretty good money. He traveled a lot, and we weren't as close as I would have liked, but we had young kids. There was lots of reasons for that. And I thought that we had a good enough marriage.
Can I interrupt you for a sec? We're getting some feedback on our microphones. Can we fix that? Thank you. So, okay, you're 28 years old, you have 3 children, you
Yeah.
have a husband that,
Yeah, he works, but he provides for our life.
how did you meet?
We actually met working at work. I also was working in IT, and when I started as like a help desk type IT person, and he was, the network guy, and so we actually bonded over failed marriages, believe it or not, and I was the other woman to his second wife.
Okay, did
Because
you
I was-
know you were?
I did. I was 18, and he told me they were breaking up, and they were, that things were bad, and it took over a year for that to actually happen, and in my 19-year-old naivety, I believed him.
Do you think that there are women in this situation who also are naive,
Absolutely.
who believe, I think it says on the back of the book, would you believe the truth or the person you trusted the most in the world?
Right. Exactly. And I believed the person that I was in love with. And I believed that he was a good man, and that he was in fact going to leave his wife at that time, and eventually he did. It took a year, and I thought, look, I won. I was right. He did leave.
So what happened in April?
So in April of 2016, he didn't come home from work one day.
Was that normal?
Nope. It was normal for him to be late and work long hours, but he never didn't come home. And so it was about 9 o'clock. I expected him even later that evening. He was supposed to help his mom after work. And he texted me at 9 o'clock asking if there was dinner. And I said, yep, there's food. And I expected him in the next 10, 15 minutes. And over an hour went by. And because he worked long hours and he sometimes didn't respond, I went, maybe he decided to go drop some stuff off, maybe something happened at work, I'm going to bed. And so I went to bed, expecting him to stroll in at any point, and I woke up to the baby wanting to nurse at 2:30 in the morning, and he wasn't there. And I got up and paced around the house, and I can't go looking for him, I have 3 sleeping kids. I called the hospitals. His phone was going straight to voicemail at that point. But my thoughts are swirling in my head. Is he dead in a ditch somewhere? What's gonna happen? I'm freaking out. I've not, made any money in so long, and how am I gonna support the kids if something happens to him? I'm going worst case scenario, mind spinning, all of it.
What had happened?
So at 5:30 in the morning, I found out that he had been arrested for attempted human trafficking with a $250,000 bond.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is 5:30 in the morning, you have 3 children.
Yep.
What do you do?
So my first thought is something is wrong. And not in a he's guilty sort of way, in a how is he mixed up in this is not okay, I need to help him. The programming in me that he was a good person and that we were a family, and I had to stand by my person and find out what was happening so I could help, because it didn't make any sense. I didn't even know what the charge meant. I was Googling because only thing I could think of was shipping containers and borders, and we were in Colorado. It didn't make sense. And I had no idea the extent of what that charge can mean. And so I start calling lawyers and bail bondsmen and just, I gotta fix it. I'm a doer. I'm amazing in a crisis. I gotta just go. And so I called all the people and eventually found a lawyer, and everybody tells me the charge is it'll go down to $100,000, just hang tight. And I still haven't even heard from him yet, but the next day he calls me at about 11 o'clock saying, this is the first time they've let me call you. I said, I know where you are. I've watched enough CSI to don't talk. I'm in a lawyer. I'm in full-on protection mode. And this is about protecting my family is where I'm at. And I don't believe there's any possibility that he could have done anything wrong.
Well, he could never do anything like that.
Of course, it made no sense.
It made no sense. So now you have a bondsman, a bail bondsman, you have a lawyer.
Yep.
What happened next?
So we go to the bond hearing. Every state, I'm sure every province does things differently, but in Colorado, a couple days after they're arrested, there's a bond hearing to set the actual bond amount. And so everybody's saying it's gonna go from $250,000 to $100,000, so just...
Who comes up with $250,000 on the drop of the hat?
Well, we did have investments at the time, and the company he worked for had sold. He had stock in the company, and so I'm over there figuring out how do I get access to that type of money to get him out, because it's not just sitting in a checking account. But so I'm selling things and trying to figure this out to be able to get him out, because I also know I can't have a conversation with him in jail. And so at the bond hearing, they don't reduce his bond. I find out they actually want to up the charge, and it's going to stay at $250,000 because they're going to try to just charge him with human trafficking instead of attempted human trafficking. And he's crying, and he's shackled hands and feet and crying on the stand, and me and his mom and his sister and everybody were just in total disbelief.
How did his family respond to all of this?
His family said, he's a lot of things, but he's not this. And they really pushed, they wanted to really make sure that I stayed and I supported him. They were scared I was gonna take whatever money I could get access to and run. And so they were solely focused on keeping me tied to him and helping him. At the bond hearing, we start to hear a little bit more about the actual arrest. And there's multiple defendants in this case, and it's some type of sting operation. and that he's...
Explain what that means,
So a sting operation is where the police, and in this case it was Homeland Security and the police, pose as people selling children, and their goal is to find people interested in purchasing these children. And then once they have their exchange, then they arrest them. That's the goal. But the presentation is never with actual children. There's no kids in danger as they're doing this. They're just trying to catch the guys interested
play
in
acting.
it. It's play acting.
It's
yes.
play acting to entice the person who's about to respond to an article. Was it
Yes.
an article?
It was an ad in
the
its back page. It was a website, a lot like Craigslist for prostitutes.
Okay.
And so some type of ad that he responded to, I still don't understand. It still doesn't make any sense to me. I'm like, an ad for what? What was, I don't, like, total dense. The ability to comprehend what was happening was not there.
So is that fear? So now are you exhibiting now the fear that millions of women go through trying to figure out how to deal with an abuser or
I don't even know that I'm in an abusive situation at this point.
Okay.
My fear is that I'm gonna get in trouble too, because they're gonna think that I'm involved and I must have known, and they're gonna come raid my house. I'm in full shock and full panic. And
So the shock is what I
the shock is where I'm at, and I don't believe that any of what they're saying could possibly be true. And so it's all about trying to protect my family.
To hold it together.
To hold it together.
Okay.
Yes.
Even though you now know that he's being charged with.
Yes. But I don't believe it. I don't believe that he's guilty in that way.
Do you think that we do that a lot, that we don't believe?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. You know, the way our brains work, we have a set of beliefs, and those set of beliefs guide our entire existence. And when something comes out that doesn't fit, we reject it. We reject it, we push it away, we say that's not possible, and we put our blinders up. And that's exactly what I did.
Okay, so what happens now?
So I still go get him out of jail, because I have to protect him is what I'm running with. And so I go bail him out, and you know, he breaks down in the car. He's clearly been through a lot, and I'm like waiting, okay, what's going on? Tell me the story. And the story that he tells me was that he responded to an ad, and when they offered children, that he didn't believe it was real, and he thought there's no way. He thought that they were just trying to scam people. And so, but he thought if it was real, then he needed to figure it out so he could report it. That was his story.
So he twisted the facts to draw you in.
Yes.
To hold you as the person who was going to help him.
He established himself as the victim.
Okay.
Is actually what he did.
Okay.
Because what he did admit to was soliciting escorts, adult escorts, which was news to me. And he was very flippant, like, oh, I've been doing this since forever. That's not a big deal. I didn't do that. And I'm going, what? You did what? How long has that been happening? Since he was 20. And he was 20 or 37 at the time. So almost his entire adult life.
And you knew nothing about
And I knew nothing. And he's just being flippant while also in projecting all of this fear and victim energy about how they're out to get him, and should he run, and he would never do something like that, and how could they think that, and they wouldn't listen to him, and why wouldn't they? Just all of this stuff going on.
the story.
The story.
Yeah, what's the story I'm telling myself now?
Yes, and he's repeating it over and over, and I'm like, hold on, like, I'm dropping you off at your mom's house because you can't come home right now. We're gonna figure this out. And my resolve to be the fixer and the helper and the healer, to keep my family together, only gets stronger.
So now he's at his parents' house, and what are you doing now?
So now I have the 3 kids on my own, and while I had been the primary person, I'm now 100% on my own. And he's not allowed internet access, he's not allowed to come near them, to do anything, and they're asking where their dad is.
So there's pieces in here about the police driving around the neighborhood and an event that took place where you had to destroy.
Yes. Yes. So the cops are driving up and down the house and driving and stopping and slowing down, and I'm in continual panic and shock. And the fear that, you know, they're gonna come after me is even heightened. And they're gonna come and they're gonna raid the house, because of course they would if they think that's what he did. That's what I would do if I was the police. And I'm like backing up my computers. I'm afraid all my baby pictures and all my, you know, bill pay things, and your whole life is on your computer.
And so what did he ask you to do?
So I asked him if there was anything that I should be worried about, because if they're gonna come raid the house, I need to know. And he said, no, I don't think so. And I'm like, but okay, but what about, you know, all of he downloaded TV and movies illegally. And I said, you know, what about those things? And I assumed they had pornography on those as well. And so he said, yeah, you should destroy them.
So I won't assume that there was.
I don't know. I never looked.
Okay.
And I was in such a state of fear and shock that I thought they were literally gonna come beating down the door at any moment.
So what did you do?
So I took all the hard drives I could find and I trashed them, because I thought I didn't want to make things worse. Even if illegally downloaded TV is another felony charge, I don't want to amplify this. Mm-hmm. It's like, he can download movies later, whatever, that doesn't matter. Yeah. I thought the smallest little thing was going to make this worse, and so I had to stop that.
How are the kids doing through this so far?
So they're young, and my youngest doesn't, you know, he's still nursing, and my middle child at the time was mostly okay. It was my oldest who was, when is daddy coming home? He's been in Cincinnati a long time. That's where he used to travel for work. And I was actually surprised that it's been a month that you still think that's where he is. But, you know, that was the norm. And I said, you know, I'm not actually sure when he's gonna come home, and we're working on it. And at the time, I still believe that he's innocent in this, and that he's got clearly a sex addiction that we've got to deal with, but we're going to put that over there, because we've got to deal with this urgent crisis right now. And so...
Is the oldest son in school?
Yes.
So at this time, were you having to go to the school?
Yes, and so there are also articles in the paper that have come out, public information, so everybody now in town knows. And, you know, where you live is not private. I feel like there's a big red A painted on my door that everybody is gonna know, and I've turned off all social media accounts, I've disabled everything. I'm isolating myself hard, because I am terrified. I'm in so much fear, and I'm holding so much shame about what they think is going on, even though that's not what I believe is going on. And so I have to disclose to the school that what is happening, and that he's got the restrictions in place.
And what were the restrictions?
So on bond, he can't be around any children, he can't come near schools. I needed to let them know that should he ever show up, they were allowed to call the police, and that they needed, if any other parents had concerns, that they would know he was never around.
So if someone is going through something similar right now, mm-hmm. how would you advise them to deal with their fear of doing all this? I mean, literally going to the school. Yeah. Talking to the principal, talking to
yes.
the teachers or whatever.
Yeah, and there was nobody else to have those conversations. It was really only me that could say those things, and I think some people would probably pull their kids out of school to not have those conversations, but I felt like keeping them in school was helpful for them, because it was their same routine. I think that it's really important to not take on the shame as your own, and the offense is your own. And it's the way that I did it was very much a factual, these are the things happening, this is the things we're doing. And they definitely tried to pry and ask a bunch of questions and what was happening, and I just said no.
So what were you doing for yourself at the time to preserve your sanity?
So it was about a month after the arrest that my sister-in-law actually offered me a treadmill. And I had gained a lot of weight by the time I had 3 kids, and I was not good at taking care of myself or making any time for myself. And
key point.
And I think a lot of people go through that. And so when she offered me a treadmill, I said absolutely, because I have 3 very young children, and one of which is with me 24/7, and I have no way to go do anything, and I wasn't a babysitter, drop them off at daycare type of mom. And so I started running, or really walking every day. It was just 30 minutes that I could do to move my body while the kids were napping or asleep at night. And that was a really, really helpful thing for me.
So do you think that that helped to raise your energy
Yes.
and your ability to cope?
It really did, because it was 30 minutes where my brain turned off a little bit, where I could actually be doing something for me, and where I could remind myself and my body that I was here and present and in my humanness. And my health took a different priority. I actually started eating again because I had pretty much stopped eating from all of the stress. And I was able to at least have something that I was doing to focus on me.
Was that new for you?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so I think that's another
Yes.
key. When I think of the themes of this story, I think these themes are universal, but I could be just making an overbroad generalization. but I think guilt, shame, fear,
Yeah.
and the imprinted program to fix our marriage
Yes.
keep us from focusing on self and on our own health and ability to cope with all of the
Yeah.
necessary steps that had to be taken.
Well, and it gave me an outlet if emotion was coming out.
Did emotion come up?
Oh, it did.
Okay.
It stayed pretty hidden for a little while, but there were times where I was running or moving and I would get this wave of anger or sadness, and I just run harder, and I just could move it in a way that I didn't know how to process that level of emotion before.
That's how I got through my divorce, was through doing triathlons, actually, so that I could run, cycle, swim, and cry and scream,
Yep.
and nobody cared. And that really helped me to heal my body and my mind.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. So moving that.
So then you're now, a month into this? Give us the pieces now, like the chronology. What happened chronologically after that?
So then we asked the courts for supervised visitation for the kids because they're asking to see their dad. And they're saying that they're sad because they can't see their dad. And I gotta help my kids have the relationship with their father, and I'm not gonna take my kid's dad away like my mom took mine away. Those programs are running.
So let's talk about that imprinting from when you're a child. So you had a relationship with your mother based on not really understanding
Correct.
what she went through
Correct.
with an abusive husband.
Correct.
Is that accurate?
Absolutely.
Okay, so can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, so when I was 9, my dad hit my mom for the first time so hard that she needed 2 root canals. And I woke up one morning and my dad says, "I hit mom and I'm leaving." And my sister was 5. And we go, "Okay." And that was really the last time we had a whole lot of conversation with him about anything.
So how did that make you feel about your mother?
So later on, once their divorce was finalized and we had done some supervised visitation with him, but then basically he stepped out of our lives except for birthdays and holidays. And later, as I got older in my teenage years, I ran into him. I literally knocked on a door 2 blocks down and he answered. And that opened the door for a relationship because I didn't remember I knew they didn't get along, but I didn't remember yelling and screaming. I just knew that they shouldn't be together. I didn't want my parents back together, but I wanted a relationship with my dad, as I think almost pretty much all children want a relationship with their parents. And so, we would talk about some of what happened, and he would say that he believed that he deserved to have more time with us, and he trusted her, and then she took everything, and he presented himself again as the victim of the situation. And so it started the programming in me that she was the one, it was wrong that he hit her, but she could have allowed us to be in his life.
And allowing him to be in your life meant being on boats?
It did. He lived on a boat, and he refused to have a house. His girlfriends had houses, but when they were first separated, he lived in his car and his boats.
And so That's interesting. So how do you feel, so now you are in essence as a young teenager, how do you feel about your mother preventing you from having a relationship?
So I started
and she doesn't know, right?
No, she has no idea that I found him or I'm having these conversations with him either. And she's tried to protect me from what happened, and she tried to protect me from what she had gone through up until that point.
And how did you respond to her trying to protect you?
Well, I was a very rebellious teenager, and I believed that at 13 I was all grown up, and that I knew everything about the world, and I would have breakdowns that I still had to live at home. So I had a very hard time even hearing her or talking to her about any of it, and I just decided that she was the bad guy, and she, you know, would want to put all these restrictions on me and control me, which was a lot of the words he used about her as well. And so I was running all of this, she's the wrong one, and I pushed hard against her.
So that's part of the programming that brought you to believe that you would do everything and anything in your power to protect your marriage, to protect your husband, and to find resolution
and to keep a father in my children's lives.
Exactly. Okay.
And so that's exactly what I was running, because I was still so angry at my mother, and so I wouldn't want my children to have that response to me. And so I believed that he would be better off if I supported him, and therefore he would be better off and a better father to the kids, and that's what they needed, and that as long as they were okay, I would be okay. That's what I believed.
So what was the next piece that started to change the story?
So the next piece, now most of these cases, and this is a hard conversation for people to have, but most of these cases actually get pled out. They rarely go to trial, there's rarely a hearing, it's always a plea deal, because at least in the United States, the goal is actually just to get them in treatment. They believe they can rehabilitate them, and that they're very unlikely to reoffend if they go through treatment, and so they don't actually care to put them in behind bars. And so the next step was to have him evaluated for probation.
And so in evaluating for probation, they do what kind of tests?
So they do a screen test where they show a bunch of pictures, and you're supposed to say I'm attracted or not attracted to the various pictures. And there's some measurement of time delay or something of the sort. They do a very extensive interview, and that's about it.
So what's the next step?
So that report was the first time that I started to learn more information, because I asked to see it. And that, because I've been running, I don't, you know, people think that when people are arrested that the family hears all the evidence. We don't see anything, because they're still waiting for the potential for it to go to trial. It stays in the police binder. And so, you know, I'm reading the evaluator's version of events, and I start to learn more information, and when he starts talking about his own sexual history, I also learned that it was not just women, that he, in the report, is admitting to also men as well, which was news to me. It's not that I cared about his attraction, it was another lie.
So one of the things that stood out for me is that in your relationship, he was interested in threesomes.
Yes.
And he was also interested in seeing pictures of you.
Yes.
When you were younger.
Yes, so when we first started dating, I was 18, 19, and again, I thought I was grown up by 13, so by 19, I knew everything about the world. And, you know, when we were early dating, it was very flirtatious and very, you know, new sexual relation, and he wanted to see pictures of me because I had a very promiscuous teenage years, and so I had pictures of myself at 16 and 17, and he wanted them, and he was very excited by them. But when you're 18, that's just 2 years ago. I don't put it together yet.
And even at 28, you still don't see the connection between who he was presenting. And so I think that's part of what we ignore when we get into these relationships.
Well, absolutely, because, you know, he portrayed his previous marriages as the problem, but things with me were different and better, and so I didn't make those connections. I didn't see those early signs, and the fact that he wanted to bring other men into our bedroom, and he wanted to, you know, watch all of that, and I didn't get it.
Okay.
Still hadn't clicked yet.
It hadn't clicked yet. And so when you read the report, what other things surprised you?
So the surprise was the men, because the truth was I had 3 boys. And there was a part of me that, was grateful that we had boys because they were more likely to be safe. But that sort of negated that one. He, at that point in time, was admitting to 50 instances with prostitutes.
That's right. There were 50 to begin with.
There were 50 to begin with.
Okay, and so these stories are changing over time. How much time is elapsing between these pieces of information that start to impregnate your spirit to go, whoa?
So that was the first new information. So he was arrested in April. The report probably came out in October, November. And, I'm still completely isolated. At this point, the only person that's even safe to talk to is my husband. Because I have no other support. It's him and only him. Everybody else couldn't possibly understand. There's huge levels of judgment. And so I'm isolated except for my abuser, which created a trauma bond.
Yes, so talk about the trauma bond, because I think that's pervasive.
And a lot of people don't, this was actually probably the most shameful part for me when I started writing the story and talking about the story is I stayed. I stayed in the marriage after he was arrested. And people don't understand how intense a trauma bond is.
And even in the trauma bond, you had sexual relationships with your husband.
Absolutely. In fact, it deepened that desire. And because the only person who could understand me was him, the only person who could understand what I was going through, and because we had this narcissistic empath-type relationship, all of the love bombing was even more intensified. So he was now going to be different in all of the things that I ever wanted him to say and ever wanted him to do, and he was doing. And he was present with me in a way that he didn't have anything else to do. So he was there and talking about things, and I had this belief that, okay, this has come up to the surface, but this is going to make us stronger. Where he's gonna get over his whatever is going on, and we're going to be the family I always wanted and never had.
When you look back on it now, I know it's easy, hindsight is 20/20. And, I'm going to say, and I think you would agree with me, that when you're going through this, you don't know what tools to use.
No.
You don't know how to extricate yourself from the situation. These are things that you learned along the way, and it's only in hindsight you look back and go, okay, so here's what I did when I started to find out what was happening.
And at that point, I didn't even know that there was anything to extricate myself from.
Right.
I thought we were gonna either, get through this, and I still thought we were gonna prove his innocence on some level. And, I start to realize with this plea deal on the table that he's likely gonna take a guilty plea, which I don't like, because that comes with sex offender registration, it comes with a felony offense, and everything that is. But when the plea deal came, it was only probation, no jail time. And so he was like, I have to take this. And I was like, you have to fight this. If there's proof that you're innocent, you have to fight this. And that was another surprise to me, because he had told me there was a draft email to Homeland Security and all of this looking up on how to report this that I thought could help prove his case. But he said, the lawyer said there was too much evidence against him. And no, that didn't trigger me to go, too much evidence against you. But I believed again that this was just him doing the best thing he could for us to keep him present in our lives.
I have to breathe through this, because it's still, when I was reading it, I was thinking, how do you not see? How do you not get it? How do you not? And then I put myself in my 28-year-old shoes, and
and there were so many women who stay in relationships, and it's not just women. Truthfully, there were men in abusive relationships as well, but there are so many people who stay in unsafe relationships, believing that everything is fine or good enough, and they're safer in the relationship because that's all they've ever known.
The devil I know is better than the devil I don't know.
And there's the financial safety component, there's the family unit component, there's all of these pieces and all of this programming telling us that it's okay, it's gonna be fine, it's maybe even gonna get better. All we have to do is stick it out.
So what's the next thing that happens that gets you now opening your instincts a bit more, your gut.
Yeah.
What happened next?
So he takes the guilty plea for 4 years of probation, and in the state of Colorado, the constitutional change had actually days before taken effect, where the sex offense no longer automatically removes your right to parent. And so when he pled guilty to the charge that he pled guilty to was attempted solicitation of a minor, he gained back his parenting rights.
I mean, that part alone just, made me sick to my stomach. I literally, I couldn't read. There were pages that I couldn't even read. I just flipped through them because I thought,
and it
how
was
is this possible?
It was a new precedent that was set in January of 2017 after a Supreme Court case in 2014 that actually instated that a sex offense does not automatically remove your right to parent when it previously had.
Okay, that's a piece that just, okay.
And there are more and more states like that, because the belief is that unless the child is the victim, that even the offender still has a right to the familial association of the family. And so at the time, I was like, great, the family's gonna come back together, he's gonna figure out how to go back to work, things are gonna be normal-ish again.
Normal-ish.
Normal-ish.
And where's he living?
So he's now moving back home.
Oh, Jesus, Mary Joseph. Oh, did I say that? I'm sorry.
He moves back home because he could.
Oh.
And he moves back home and, he starts doing some contract work, and I can see that he's not okay and that he's not actually getting anything productive done. He's just futzing around the house. And I'm excited that I don't have to take all 3 kids with me everywhere I go all the time, because there's somebody else at home. But I start to realize he's not okay and that somebody's gonna have to go back to work. And it starts to really be loud in my intuition, in my gut, that needs to be me. And so I started looking. I hadn't worked in a long time. I knew it was gonna come back into more of an entry-level position, but I also knew, and I really started to feel like he may not ever fully recover. And if I'm ever gonna go back to work, I need to not have the gap be any longer than it already is.
Savior.
Yes.
I'm gonna save this family.
Yeah, absolutely. And I knew that I was never gonna make the money that he made, but we were gonna be less in the red, and that it would grow over time as, I moved on in my career. And so I start looking for work, and my youngest now is 2. And, I had stayed home with all of my children, and I breastfed them all for 2-3 years. So the idea of even leaving my 2-year-old was hard, but he was 2, he was eating food, he was playing. It was gonna be okay. I wasn't leaving my newborn.
And he was going to be parented by your husband while
Yes.
you were at work.
Yes, and at the time, I thought that was a good thing, because I didn't like the idea of daycares, and I thought he'll be home with daddy. Yes, I know, hindsight.
2020.
Yes, and so I get a job, I get an offer, and I'm like, oh my, I'm gonna do this, which also happens to actually be in April of 2017.
Are you serious?
I am
Oh my
serious.
God, I didn't know that. Oh,
April is apparently the month for me.
Well, it is the month of Easter, and Easter is the resurrection month.
Yeah, I believe
right?
it was actually April 17th that I went back to work. That was my start date.
And we're the 18th.
Yeah.
Oh.
So.
Okay, carry on.
Anyway, so I go back to work. I'm back in help desk roles. And all of a sudden I realize I'm more than a mom and a wife, and I can use my brain, and I'm very excited to be doing something else again. It's fun, but I'm also terrified. Because I have the same last name as the person that they maybe read about in the paper a year ago. And they know that I have a husband and children, but I don't even say his name because I don't want anybody to connect the dots.
So for how long did you live in fear in that job?
Gosh, probably 9 months.
9 months. Now, in that time period, you also had an affair.
It did. That was after the 9 months,
After the
because
9
I started to disclose. I connected with somebody, and I started to share what I was actually going through.
So you started to deal with the shame, the fear, the guilt.
Yes.
And started to form other relationships.
Yes.
And started to step out of the panic,
Yes.
shock mode
Yes.
into now a new level of frequency and of awareness.
Yes.
Is that accurate?
It is. So I had my family bubble that nobody could learn about or talk about, and I had my work bubble, but they weren't allowed to talk to each other. I didn't, the company Christmas party, I had a full-blown panic attack because you're supposed to bring your spouse. But I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to hurt his feelings. I didn't even know if he could come, but no, we're not doing that. And so I started to realize, okay, if my two bubbles can't talk to each other, what's the problem?
Two worlds colliding.
Yeah.
So take us to when the next event happens that starts to shift in the next direction.
Yes, so I find myself having feelings for my coworker. And this is the first person I've opened up to about my life. And he just had been broken up with and was wallowing in his self-pity for the most part, and going on about how everything in his life has one central theme, and it's all about him. And I went, hold up, and I was so triggered when he said it. Everything in my life, this is not my fault. Because he was full self-deprecating, and I went, no. And I just vomited it all out, and I shocked him with what was happening. And he looks at me and he says, wow, you're going through all that and kicking ass at work? And his perception towards me changed. And I felt seen in a way that I had not felt seen in years. Because somebody saw everything that I was going through and everything I was putting forward.
Do you think that was integral to the next step in dealing with?
It was, because I no longer was alone.
Okay.
I no longer was alone.
So for anybody who's watching this, listening to this, what would you say?
Find somebody who is safe.
So safety and share.
Yeah.
And
somebody
understand that you will be, it's okay to be real.
Yes, and somebody who loves you with compassion no matter what. And that's really what I felt at that time.
How long did that last?
We dated for about 6 months.
And how did that end?
Well, I got promoted. So I was gonna now be his boss.
Oh. Okay.
And that was a no-no. And we weren't public about our relationship at work, but it wasn't a no-no until I got promoted. And so I was going to be taking over the IT department. This was a good promotion, but I was now going to be his boss. And so I had this realization that, because things they were messy. I was living at home with my spouse, with my kids, and I was dating my coworker. It was very messy. Nobody knew how to act around each other. If I wanted time away from my husband, who I was separating from, because I did this all out in the open. I told my husband I was going to be dating someone else. I said, I know what it likes to be cheated on and in secret, and I'm not doing that. I can't do this anymore.
Yeah, so it seems to me that you wrote some very interesting dialogue about what your husband had to say.
And he, so he tried everything possible to basically pull on all of my heartstrings about keeping the family together. And so he basically said, I'm not gonna move out, we'll be weird normal. You go date, I'll keep the household. And in that process, he also thought that he could do everything he could to absolve himself somehow, and that maybe I would get this out of my system and come back to him. That was his belief.
And so, because people are going to read the book,
yeah.
I'm going to jump now to the piece where now you get more information.
Mm-hmm.
So are we in this a year now?
So I got more information just before I started dating.
Okay.
As part of his probation, they are required to go through 2 sex history polygraphs. So they're strapped to the polygraph machine, asked about their entire sexual history. And I'm sure that's not comfortable to go through, but you shouldn't have done what you did. So they go through this, and in order to get permission to pick up the children from school with still you got to go 3 blocks to do it, he went through this a little bit earlier than some people. And as part of his safety person, which I was established as his contact, I had to read his sex history polygraphs.
Oh my God.
Yes. So and they're not allowed to be removed from the the therapist office and there's all the HIPAA stuff, but I get to go in to it and sit down and read it. And so I'm reading it, and there's more disclosure, again, more things that I didn't know about. And the two biggest ones were the number of prostitutes went from 50 to 100, doubled. And he admits to a time in his teenage years where he was changing a toddler's diaper and became aroused. And the therapist says this is no big deal.
Yeah, and I didn't know this, but there is a thing out there where people have had sex with children
Yes.
younger than 1.
I know.
So that shocked me when you
Yeah.
wrote that, and I'm so grateful that you're writing with such transparency, because these are the conversations we don't have.
No.
And if people don't know, it's easy to hide under a rock. And I've been living in a bubble myself, because there was a lot of it that I didn't know. So take me further into this. So you read the polygraph results.
Yes, and the therapist, whose job is to run this sex offense treatment program, says this is no big deal because 13-year-olds get erections, when the wind blows. That's the reasoning.
That's normal.
It's normal. It's no big deal. We don't think anything of it.
Okay.
And so I'm sitting here going, wait, you're telling me this is okay?
I have 3 children.
Yeah.
I have 3 boys.
Yep.
And my husband is changing their diapers, or
Was at one point. Yep.
okay.
And
carry
so, except it's, at this point, I'm told to entrust my, his treatment and everything into this system. That they're rehabilitating. They have this great track results, and they're not worried about it, so I shouldn't be worried about it. And I'm also very overwhelmed as a now full-time working mom of 3 who is the only person able to drop off and pick up and do any of the things. And so I'm trying to get some help with it. So truthfully, there was a big piece of me that if he got approved to, the kids could walk a couple blocks with their teacher, then I didn't have to pick up and do the after-school care and all of the rest of it. And so there was also a very selfish part of me that just didn't want to deal with it anymore.
Yeah, and so I think that's part of the victim thing too,
Yes.
right, is to hide and to not deal with what...
We're just not going to look in that direction.
Let's not look at that yet. Let's just put that over here,
Yeah,
and we'll deal with that later.
yeah,
So it's easy to hide our true
Exactly.
instincts in the gut.
yes.
Okay.
Yes, and and then as I start dating and we have some more conversations, he also writes me a letter in which it's
I
not
love the letter.
it's not verbatim in the book because I cannot. I actually still have it, but it is not something that I can publish somebody else's writing. But I transcribe it essentially through my own words. Where
That letter just made my guts turn inside out.
The energy behind it is quite disgusting, honestly. He calls it confessions, I believe, of something, and in it he admits to every single time throughout our entire marriage where he hurt me. And he admits to the beginning of lying to me in the beginning while we were dating and knowing that I would do anything for him and putting me in that position. And he admits to every time he withheld love and affection from me. And he admits to using my insecurities against me. He admits to these things over and over again about making himself more important than me.
And he saw this as therapy.
He did, and he does so candidly, and he's admitting to doing it with complete knowing of what he was doing and complete callousness. And he admits to, trying to meet children for sex, essentially. He doesn't say that in that words, but he admits to showing up and meeting and breaking every rule possible and maybe would have done even worse. That's as close to admittance as I ever got. And then he says, and after all of this, I still want you. I want you back, and you're gonna go have fun with somebody else, and then I want us to come back together because nobody will ever love you like I will.
The guilt trip.
Yes, and the family.
And the family. Okay, so what do you do with that information?
So after that letter, I'm furious. It doesn't work like he thinks this is gonna be therapy, he's gonna admit his wrongdoings, and I'm gonna see it, and I am so angry because he's admitting to hurting me knowingly and doing it anyway.
Intentionally.
Intentionally gaslighting and manipulating me our entire marriage.
And that's the profile
It is.
of the abuser. They know exactly what they're doing to
They do.
control their victim.
They do. They do.
When did you step out of victim?
Oh gosh. I didn't step completely out of victim until I changed my energy to fight for my kids in a different way. But that was still another 6 months. No, it was actually a whole another year later.
What else do you want to tell us about that period after you read that letter?
So that's when I further separated from him, and
But he's still living in
he's
your
still
house.
living in the house. He refuses to move out at this point. And so I, again, hide and don't deal with it by enjoying my new dating relationship. And again, learning how to have fun again, taking care of myself. And that was actually a really important time.
Mhm.
And I think if I, were to map out the healing journey, finding yourself in the fun and joyful times is very important.
Yeah.
Even if for a minute means you're not dealing with the other pieces.
That's going to be hard for a reader to understand.
I know.
But, when we talk about the tools for healing, how important was that?
It was really important because I also got to see that there was somebody else who could love me too. And it wasn't, I had a lot of beliefs about, my post-baby body even.
Yeah.
And, but being with somebody who didn't bring ghosts in the bedroom, because that's literally how it had gotten to feel. And somebody who was fun in a different way, and who saw me and just wanted me to laugh, was really healing.
So now you're in a full-blown relationship.
Yep. But then I get promoted. So
So now that shifts.
So that has to shift, and I break up with him because I start to see that my ex, but we're still married, the manipulations, I kind of start to see them a little more. My kid's behavior is changing towards me. My 3-year-old at the time now says to me, "Mommy, are you going to have a baby with somebody else and run off and leave us?" And I said, "What? Where no 3-year-old gets an idea like that."
So they are being manipulated
Yes.
by your husband,
Yes. And
who is filling their minds with stories about mommy.
he keeps telling them that I'm leaving them. I'm leaving all of them. And everything I've done, and he builds this belief in his head that even me going back to work is abandoning the children, is abandoning them. And I start to see the behavior towards me is changing. They become more volatile. They're not listening to me. I feel like I'm all of a sudden a stranger in my own home. But, I've broken up with my boyfriend, and I gotta deal with this.
So these subtleties, so anybody listening to this interview or reading this book needs to understand these subtle
Yes.
changes
Yes.
in behavior.
Yes,
in
the
attitude,
children's
in
behavior
vocabulary.
and the abuser's behaviors,
Right.
because his behavior towards me changed once he realized I wasn't gonna come back to him after.
Right,
And when he realized that I was not interested,
right.
that I was actually done, this wasn't just a thing I needed to get out of my system, his behavior continued to change. And he started to push the boundaries I was trying to set. He would come into my space, he would try to hug me and touch me, and at that point I was viscerally like, get away.
So your body's waking up.
Yes, my body is responding in a don't touch me, don't talk to me, and
And you're living in the same house.
we're living in the same house, and the only way I can even spend time with my children, because he will never leave, he can't go anywhere, so he's there all the time, is if I'm around him. And I don't really know exactly what to do about it. I start to realize I need to talk to some lawyers, and I start to have some conversations with lawyers, and the lawyers first told me they didn't think that, they weren't even sure a judge would give him custody with his offense history, but it would depend on the judge. And she said, your support of him is gonna be a barrier for you, which I knew. And this is true for anybody who stays in an abusive relationship, is they look at, well, you stayed, so it was okay. They assume that we have all of the awarenesses and the information the whole time. And I only have these niggles of things aren't okay. I don't have concrete evidence or proof. Nothing he's done is against the law. And so, next thing I know, he files for divorce. And I'm like, I am probably more hurt by this than almost anything else he had done, because I had fought tooth and nail to keep the family together, and he was ripping it apart. And he not only files for divorce, he files a temporary order to remove me from the home. He's trying to say that he's the primary parent, he's the one who's been home, and I've been off gallivanting, and so I need to be the one who moves out.
So he's been collecting evidence
Yes.
against you to prove that you're an unfit mother and that he should be the primary
Yep.
caretaker.
Yep.
And so, yeah, carry on with that strain, because
Yeah.
that happens a lot.
It happens a lot. It happens a lot. And all of my ways of trying to cope were seen as me being an unfit mother. You know, I had a little bit of a wine habit because I couldn't look at my husband, and so I would come home and have half a bottle of wine. And so now I was being portrayed as a drunk. And I was being portrayed as somebody who was, you know, out sleeping with their coworkers. And I was home, he claimed I was home like less than 50% of the time, which was not true. And so he just continued to push at all of these things.
So he's collecting evidence, but you haven't gotten to that point yet?
No.
Okay.
No, all I feel is anger, and I am so upset and so angry, and how dare you after I supported you through all of this.
And he's pushing every button
Yes.
that he knows he
Yes.
can use with you,
Yes.
which
And
is something that abusers do.
he does. He even tells me, if you fight, that the kids will hate you like you hated your mom. He even says those words to me. And so, you know, I know that things are not okay, but I don't have any evidence. I don't have any way to fight. And my lawyers so we go to court for the temporary orders because neither one of us is agreeing to move out. And I need him out of my house. I cannot be around this anymore because I go from feeling like I'm in a war zone to a complete stranger. You know, I come home and everybody's fed, they're playing a game. I'm not a welcome party in my home anymore. And so my lawyer tries to go with a very hard stance saying this is his history. We'd like to, you know, he needs to move out, have no overnights. And we go to this temporary orders hearing, and he just pushes at all of these buttons. He talks about me having my boyfriend over at the house. He talks about what we're doing behind closed doors and the impact that's having to the children. He's making me out to be this unfit parent.
Yes.
And he's the good one because his therapist and his PO say that he's in full compliance.
Yeah, so full compliance means what?
Well, there's a long list of actual compliance, but according to his probation's admittance in court later on, he paid the probation bill. So they don't actually.
So that's what compliance means.
As far as they were concerned, he didn't get in enough trouble that raised anybody's flags, so he's good.
Okay, because he didn't actually have sex with a child because it was a sting.
Well, that they could prove.
That they could prove.
Right.
Okay.
And nothing had come out, and you know he wasn't getting in trouble again anywhere else, and he paid the probation bill and he went to his therapy, so he's doing what he's supposed to.
And what was the therapy doing?
So the therapy was a weekly group therapy session where they were supposed to be talking about and, you know, disclosing and working through. There's a lot of variety of therapy methods, but the idea is to try to help them see their patterns and their belief structures and all of that. But what it was actually doing was, as it was uncovering, he started using me as his therapist. He would want to dig into all of the things that he had done with me, and never mind the fact that I was the victim in a lot of this situation. And he kept not understanding why it was triggering me and why I didn't want to have these conversations. And if I tried to walk out of the room, he would follow me, and how dare I?
When did it get abusive beyond that?
So before he moved out, there were more times where he would just get on these tangents, and he would go and he would spin in his head and he would do so out loud, and he would try to talk to me and try to convince me that he was changed and all these things. And I'm sitting on the couch and he's going on and on and on about all these things that I've done to him. And so he flips this and he's talking about how I did this to him and how I dated openly in front of him and how I went out and had fun with my friends and I was doing all these things and my friends are telling me about what I'm saying, and he's just going on and on and on and on, and it probably goes on for hours. And I'm sitting there and I start shaking. My whole body is having this huge response.
Creating trauma.
And I can't even move. And I'm not even really hearing him anymore because all he's doing is basically verbally berating me about all of the things that I did wrong.
When does he move out?
So he moves out after the temporary orders hearing because he unsuccessfully convinced the judge to, the moment I said I wanted him out, she's like, he needs to move out. But in the temporary orders hearing, because there was no evidence that he was a danger to these children and I had nobody with any provable evidence, the judge was very, very clear, with what you have given me, I cannot remove overnights. And so we ended the temporary orders, which is not the final hearing, but the temporary, with a 50-50 arrangement where the kids were going to go back and forth 4 times a week.
That in
And-
itself makes me sick to my stomach.
Yep.
That they are now going to be spending overnights
Without me.
without you,
Yes.
in his care,
Yes. Yes. And there's nothing I can do about it.
and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And my lawyer's here very clearly with what you've given us, and so, okay, we need to find something. We need to do something. We need to bring in evaluators, and I'm feeling completely paralyzed because I don't want any of this. I don't want to be in this situation. I know that 50-50 is wrong. I know all of this is wrong, but I don't even know what is the right answer, because I also still believe the kids need their dad in their lives, and so I'm totally pulling myself apart, and I'm ripping this piece in me, going, they need safety, and this isn't safe, but they also need safety, and they need their dad, and
So your imprinted programs were
Yes.
still taking control
Yes.
of how you were proceeding in the circumstances.
Yes, exactly.
And by imprinted programs, I mean the programs that we learn through television, through music, through
Yes.
society, through our parents, through our relatives, through school,
Yes.
all those
Yes.
ways that we learn to think and believe.
Exactly. And I also have this imprinted program about the system and the way that they're supposed to help us and protect us and keep us safe. And so I've hired the lawyers, I've hired the people I'm supposed to help me through this, and I believe that they're the ones who actually should be making the decisions.
So, so what I know from reading the book is that didn't work. No, so that's the other piece that I was hoping we would bring to this conversation, is the fact that at one point you realized
Yes.
that the system was not going to do what you thought it was going to do, and that your children were not going to be protected.
Correct.
You were not going to be protected. So I'm going to use my vocabulary again and say that at some point you put away your BB guns and got out your
Yes.
bazookas, and you made a decision.
Yes.
So this is a piece that I'm really curious about, because it means that you put your big girl pants on. So
Yes.
at some point, when you're a victim, there's a place where you step out of victim
Yes.
and you actually step into new skin, or a skin that allows you to step into a place where you can think more clearly and you can take charge, instead of thinking that somebody's going to rescue you, somebody's going to get this right, somebody's going to do what needs to happen
Yes.
in order to, because now you're having doubts about
Yes.
how well protected your children are.
Correct.
So to lead us through that.
So, as part of all of the process, we go to mediation, and I realize that I need help. I hire more people to help me, and I hire a parental rights evaluator, which is a third party, to come in, and I give her all of the power. She knows how to do this. She'll figure it out, and things just get worse. They just get worse between me and my kids now, and now, even though my husband's not with us, the kids' relationship and I is not getting better, it's getting worse. They're telling me that Daddy told us that you guys aren't together because you're mad at Daddy. And
You need to forgive Daddy.
Yeah, you need to forgive Daddy. And Daddy's lonely when we're not there. And all of this stuff is coming. And so their alienating behavior towards me is even amplifying.
So they're being imprinted with programs.
Yes, and I know where it's coming from. I know who's causing it. I can see that. And so I'm funneling all of this to the evaluator. The kids actually have a physical altercation with me where they're refusing to come to my house. And my three very young children that I birthed and nursed and cared for are fighting, kicking, screaming, running away from me, not wanting to be with me because they had been playing video games all day and having fun, and Daddy had been encouraging that behavior over and over again by telling them how cute they were being and how fun this was. And so they continued. And so all of that was brought through in her first report, but because of the statutes in Colorado, it was still recommended that he get basically 50-50 parenting time. And the only exception to that would be a decision-making where I would have a little bit more when it came to extracurriculars in school and mental health decisions, because I was really the one who was gonna have to deal with those things. And I felt like, well, I don't really have a choice. I've hired all the people. This is what they're telling me I have to do. And so we actually sent over a settlement to say, okay, let's try. And the settlement goes ignored for over a month because he doesn't like that I have any more decision making than he does. And he doesn't respond. But in that month, shit hits the fan. Excuse my language. But
So that's the tipping point?
that's the tipping point.
Okay.
Because in that month, the behavior of my middle child changes again. And this time his behavior towards me becomes sexual. And as I'm driving him to school one day, he says out of nowhere, "Sometimes I suck on daddy's fingers." And my body had a just shock moment. And I started to go, what ever loving is going on in that house?
So just nonchalantly, out of the blue.
I was driving him to school. He just, as kids do. And I can't respond. I can't scare him. I can't do anything. I call my lawyers. I call the therapists. Everybody says you can't bring new information into a divorce hearing. You're going to be seen as the alienating parent if you make new accusations.
Ding, 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 ding.
And I'm like, well, what the
Red
hell?
flags.
What am I supposed to do? And so then I talked to my child's therapist. They were in therapy. And she says, ask him to show you what that means. I said, okay. So I asked my son to show me. And it's as bad as you can expect. And I call her back and I tell her. And she says, if you'd done that in front of me as a mandatory reporter, I would have to report it. And my lawyer said, with that, you can go ahead and report it. I said, okay. So I called Child Protective Services and made the report, and then you wait. You make the report, and it's not like anything magically changes. And so I'm kind of freaking out. I don't know what's gonna happen. I even emailed probation and all of them to let them know that I was making this report. But I don't hear anything for a couple days. And then next time I see my kids, I pick them up. And my son is very upset because they haven't seen daddy in a couple days. And I don't know what's happening. And the Child Protective Services worker had called me and wanted to interview my son. And so he interviewed him, and the caseworker just, they do their little nice to meet you, and then he just kind of point blank asks my 6-year-old child at the time, hey, I heard you, play this game where you suck on daddy's fingers. Do you still do that? And my kid is so terrified of the man, he's literally hiding under the kitchen table as he's asking him this question. And I'm watching this play out, like, this guy's allowed to work with kids? What? This is not how you talk to children. And certainly you don't ask that question in my home. Like, this is not how this is supposed to happen. And, my son says, oh, we don't do that anymore, and barely responds. And the guy leaves and says, okay, we're gonna go interview dad now. And I'm feeling just, what?
Yeah, no kidding.
And I find out later from my kids, a couple days later, that daddy was back at home, no problem. And I guess probation had polygraphed him again and then cleared him. So all was well. And so then Child Protective Services called me back and says, yeah, probation cleared him. We're good. That's it.
So is this where you've reached the point now where you're wide awake?
I am wide awake, and all of the red flags that I had been ignoring, all of the previous stuff from me as a teenager, me as a young 20s, me this entire marriage, it is flooding me. Like the gates are open.
What does that look like for someone who's watching this interview or hearing this interview? What do they do once they get that going?
It's a terrifying moment, because at that point in time, I still believe that I've been doing everything possible.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been doing everything that I'm supposed to be doing. I've been hiring all the people. I've been following all the steps. I've even got Child Protective Services involved, and nobody's doing anything. And I'm well aware now that this is more serious.
So I think this is a really good intersection point, because you're going to now go into kind of the final chapters of waking up, realizing that you need to find the right support, because somehow we think the law is going to do it.
We do.
And so what I'm going to ask Sarah, you're not Amanda, you're Sarah, to do is, it's 8 o'clock and Sarah needs to leave. So I'm going to ask Sarah to actually speak just briefly about some of the services that are available here in our community and that are available in other cities and other countries, presumably. Sarah's going to talk about Carmel and about, well, whatever you choose. So Sarah, if you wouldn't mind taking the microphone. Sarah is a healer here in town. She's not only teaches yoga, but she's a massage therapist for dozens of years. And she's an expert in human design and the gene keys, which helps people to learn who they are in this body at this time, and to understand some of the patterns that they've acquired over time as this person in this body. So Sarah, would you mind giving us a couple minutes about Carmel and what you're going to be providing?
I'll do my best. Oh my goodness. This is difficult for me to even speak right now, Amanda. I'm so grateful for your candor and your bravery to speak as authentically as you are. Is really, I'm in awe, and I just want to champion you for being as honest as you are. I'm definitely feeling some of my childhood triggers coming up. I've been practicing as a professional, working with people in mind, body, and soul for 20 years. And like most people that go into this sort of genre, I'm going to try and take this off.
I don't think it comes off.
What draws us to come into this genre is usually trying to organize ourselves around our own trauma. So most of the time when I work with people, there's been a certain amount of elements of trauma that they weren't able to integrate in their life, and it becomes baked into the body. It becomes physically baked into the expression of our DNA and in our energetic field and in our consciousness. And we can't see what's going on, and it displays as disease and behavior, or a malaise of a number of different symptoms. And I was trying to figure out a lot of what was showing up for my patients, and that led me into some time working as a retreat leader in yoga and working with a lot of other kind of consciousness and spirituality facilitators. That led me down the direction of the Gene Keys, which is it's a fascinating book about awakening consciousness that speaks about how everyone has an imprint, that they come into life with an opportunity to transcend through the way that they interact with their trauma, the way that they interact with the people in their life and their challenges. And within that, we get to reorganize in a new expression of our health. And so I really appreciate this as a tool because it's very specific as far as mapping an individual person's experience of awakening. And yeah, I've had the opportunity to work with quite a few practitioners. And what I do now, what my company is that I've created, is a software company where I bring in other healing practitioners. So they can be spiritual practitioners, they can be regulated practitioners, counselors, physiotherapists, massage therapists, acupuncturists. I also work with nutritionists. I work with, it just opens up. The moment you start kind of working with people, you realize that there's so many other people that are working in the healing genre. I met two other friends this evening, Brittany and Roxanne, and we were reminiscing on like how much more is available than we're ever taught is available in healing, and it's becoming more and more prevalent that people are telling their story. And so what I'm wanting to bring is more community around healing, more conversations around this, and I have a couple of workshops that are coming up in the next month. I also have several over the next couple of months that most of them aren't mine. There are other healing practitioners that I work with and am working on promoting. And so if you're interested, whether you want to be involved in talking about yourself as a practitioner or a healer, or you have interest in curating something for yourself where you want some advice of who to bring in and when to bring them in, that's something I kind of have this joke. I call myself a sommelier of wellness. I know a lot of when is the right person and who to bring in and how long to work with somebody before you kind of move to the next level of it. So I left some cards at the front. Thanks for letting me speak about it. I really appreciate the opportunity, and yeah, just to be able to come and share all of this with people, it feels really meaningful.
So I'm going to add that Sarah's magical. And I've had 2 opportunities to work very closely and do very deep work with her. And I have to say that it was through those transformations and those openings in my field that allowed me to do this. Because when I first read the book, there was no way I could have done this. But it was through doing some one-on-one work with Sarah that allowed me to step into this place where I feel the confidence to open this door. So thank you, Sarah. I appreciate you coming, and I appreciate what you're doing in the community and the software that you're developing that's going to allow healers and clients to find each other, and the financial support so that the healer is paid, but also so the client can afford to be supported. So thank you for Karma Well.
Yeah, thanks I forgot that part. We're setting it up so that employers can also contribute to their employees in this way. So yeah, appreciate your words. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Do you guys want to take a little break so everyone can use the washroom and like stretch for a moment? Would that feel good?
Does anybody need a break?
You guys look pretty settled.
Okay.
Okay.
So we're not going to go too much longer, but thank you, Sarah. I do want to get to the piece, which is, to me, the place where you step into your big girl pants.
Yes.
And where we step out of victim and into our personal power, and in that place where we go, okay, I'm going to do whatever it is that I need to do, separate from everything else that I've done, all the money I've invested, all the people I've tried to work with.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of people get lost,
Yes.
is that they've hired these people and they think that's the solution. Whereas you taught me and you've taught in this book,
Yes.
that here's the next step. So how would you discuss the next step?
So for me, this is my rock bottom point. I'm seeing all of this play out, and I can feel the trajectory playing here, because we've been here before. We went to temporary orders. Unless I can prove that my kids are in danger, which Child Protective Services basically just said they were not, that I was going to be sharing custody with a man who was going to be abusing my children. And not just in a manipulative, not so awesome way, but in a serious, potentially very, very harmful sexual way. And I feel like I've done everything. I'm at my wit's end, and I'm in therapy for my own sake, and I'm working with a therapist because I'm diagnosed with PTSD at this point. I'm having panic attacks at every interaction that is going on, because every even transfer of child is like a full-on hostage negotiation.
So that's the picture of brokenness.
Yes.
That a lot of people around
Yes.
start to look at the wife or the person and wonder why there's this blank
Yeah.
canvas of she's not really home, she's not really present, because she's protecting herself and she's in shock,
Yeah.
trauma, and just trying to survive.
Yeah, you're full on survival mode, and all of your whole system is in survival mode at all times. You're not sleeping, you're nothing. And so I'm
And you're
talking
in fight or flight.
completely. And I've been in fight or flight for years, but it's just amplifying.
So describe fight or flight for you.
So for me, it's a nervous system state where everything is a hyper trigger, and I'm not a hide in the closet sort of fight or flight person. I'm a big, loud fight for my kids, fight for my family, fight for everything. That was all still me in fight or flight. And so now that's just getting amplified. So what else can I do is my actual trauma response is to go do more things, but I'm doing things with the programming that somebody else needs to be hired to fix this, right? So I'm spinning in that. And so I'm talking to my therapist. She's shocked. She's been in this system, that this is still playing out, that people aren't seeing it. And I don't know what to do. And then she says, I'm leaving her office. And she says to me, kind of just out of nowhere, have you ever thought about seeing a psychic? And I was like, what? I'm completely agnostic, totally not spiritual. Like, you know, my head, I'm like a fortune teller, like at a circus? What? No. That's where my head goes. And she's like, no, not like, I was like, are they real? Do you know somebody? And she's like, yeah, I do. And I was, you know, I'm trying to wrap my head around the fact that my regular mental health therapist.
I paid for lawyers. I paid for. I've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in this, and you want me to see a psychic?
Yeah, that's what she says.
All right.
And at the same time, I'm at rock bottom.
Yeah.
Fine.
Anything.
Sure, I'll try it. You know what? Send me the info. I'm willing. And you know, my mom had been very spiritual growing up, but because I also rejected her, I rejected all of her beliefs. And I didn't like organized religion. I didn't like the judgments that were placed on me as a female in those situations. And so I just stayed away from all other beliefs. But I was willing to try anything at this point. And so I went to see this lady, and you know, there's deities and crystals everywhere, and she tells me to take off her shoes and that all the electronics aren't gonna work around her. And I'm just like, okay, lady. All right, I can do this. What does she have to say? And she sits me down and she tells me that her gift is that she sees angels like they're people. They're just walking around. I'm like, well, that's cool. And she says they're jumping up and down. They've been trying to get you in here, and the reason you're here today is for me to tell you this story, because you don't just get in to see this lady. And she just happened to have a cancellation open up in her calendar, and she didn't even turn her phone off at lunch like she normally does. So when I called, she picked up, and like all of this stuff. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'm here, I'm listening, but I'm still not quite believing yet. But she's continuing, and she starts talking about a past life of me that with my husband, where in that life he was physically abusive. But things were okay-ish, you know, until the kids came. But then I started to try to protect the kids, and I started to step in front of them. And he was a drunk in that life, and would start to come after the kids, and I would step in the way. And so she starts reading this parallel where she's basically saying, you know, his drug of choice was alcohol, and now his drug of choice is sex. And he was physically violent, and this time it's very emotionally and mentally manipulative. But she's reading it like it's the same thing. And she says, this is the loudest karmic echo I've seen in years.
A karmic echo.
That's the word she used. And that's basically, she was reading it like this has happened before in some way.
And how are you responding?
And so she's telling me about this, and then she starts talking about all the reasons I stayed in that life. And it's like she's in my head over the last 4 years. And she starts talking about I have to stay with the family, and I have to provide for my kids, and I have to, all of these things that had been repeating, all of the programming that I had been running, she's telling me. I was like, okay, this is getting eerie now, because how is this lady in my head? And so I'm listening, and then she tells me that in that life, he threw me down the stairs and beat me to death. And she starts saying, I'm watching this happening, and my body has this huge, like, fear, goosebump, visceral response. And I'm like, oh my God, like, okay, I believe you now. And I start to understand that the fear that I'm holding is fear from another experience. Mm-hmm. And the reason I was so terrified of him, because I was terrified of him. I felt like everything he did, he was watching me and stalking me and trying to control me, but he never laid a hand on me. And I didn't get why I was so scared. And now I got it. And she says, you need to get a handle on that fear, because you're not living 500 years ago, and you can own property, and you can do all of this. And so you can make a different choice.
So she's the one who guided you to make a different choice.
She is. She said, the reason your angel sat you down in this chair today is because you need to choose. And I said, I have chosen. I've been doing everything. She says, no, you have not yet chosen. And it was in that moment that I realized, even though I, on paper, had been doing everything, and I've been hiring the people and following the steps.
The system.
There was a part of me, first of all, that still wanted my marriage, that still wanted my husband to get better, that wanted to believe that none of this was real, that wanted to see him as the person that I married and the family that I had made up in my head.
Ah, the fantasy.
Yes.
Oh, wow, yes.
I was still running hope that he could get better, that this was all a misunderstanding still. I was still running, even with all of this right in front of me, I still had that thread there. And I still was holding on to hope that maybe down the road the kids could have a father, or maybe even we would even get back together in some different alternate universe. And I saw that. I saw that I was still running that. And I saw that that is actually what was keeping me from really stepping into myself. And then I was giving all of my power to the system to fix it when I hadn't actually decided I wanted to fix it.
That's a key point right there, because I think that a lot of people stay in victim because of the fantasy,
Yeah.
because of the story they're telling themselves, and because it's too scary to step into owning and 100% accountability. I am 100% accountable for what I create and for the outcomes I desire. And so that there's a thread there.
Well, there's a huge amount of shame to admitting that despite all of this,
Yeah.
you still want to keep your family together.
Yeah, yeah,
And
okay.
admitting it even to yourself.
That's a powerful statement, Amanda.
Because we don't want to believe that of ourselves either. And when I saw that that was what was keeping me in this situation, and that was what was keeping my kids in this very unsafe place, I got it. And I couldn't get it when it was about me, but when I saw my kids in danger, I got it.
Isn't that something though? Because we don't do it to protect ourselves, we do it to protect our children. We make those choices to protect our children.
Yes. And so I stood up in that chair in the psychic's office and I said, I'm done.
Yeah, this
I'm
is it.
done. And she said, okay, good, I can help you now. And what she told me was there were more people who could help me. There was more people out there, not that other than what I was doing. And then I needed to keep going. And I needed to tell everybody. I needed to talk about it. I needed to ask for help. Be respectful, but keep asking, keep pushing. There are more people out there wanting to help me, and then I can't stop.
So once you let go of the thread of trying to put your marriage back together,
Yeah.
that's when the doors started to open,
Yes.
the floodgates started
Yes.
to open to find people that would really help you
Yes.
and to start to collect evidence.
Correct. Because until I chose, those doors were shut.
Right, and that's a very concrete thing that I hope people get from this conversation.
Yes. And we think we've chosen a lot of times.
Yeah.
But every single level and layer of ourselves has to really choose that we are ready to step into this next place.
Yeah,
We are-
because we tell ourselves a lot of lies
we do.
to protect ourselves.
We do. We're trying to keep ourselves safe in the things that we know, and it's scary as all get out to step out into something totally different and to, realize that I was going to be confronting the man who had been not only abusing me and my kids in this lifetime, but all of it, and I was going to be facing all of it at once, but I knew I had to. And I left her office a different person. Energetically, I was a different person. And I immediately went into my friends' offices at work and I started asking for help. And miracles literally started to unfold. My coworker, I had no idea, she had an uncle who worked for ICE, who put me in touch for Homeland Security. So that's all of the border people in the US. So she put me in touch with Homeland Security. They were appalled that somebody who'd been charged with sex trafficking had access to my children. She was appalled that we were never interviewed, that our house was never actually raided, even though that was my fear. She was completely appalled that they had done none of the things they were supposed to do. They put me in touch with the arresting officer, the man who put the cuffs on him in 2016, and his partner in the local police department.
What year is it now?
It is now very early 2020.
Jeez, and this started in 2016.
Yes, so this is 4 years of a lot. And so they put me in touch with all of them. They are vowed to help me. They want to reopen the Child Protective Services report. They want to actually have my child forensically interviewed like he was supposed to have been done in the first place. Nothing ended up coming of that, and too much time had passed and too much other things had happened. But he also was very clear with me, just because he made no disclosures does not mean nothing happened. It just means no disclosures were made. And then it was actually, I got the idea to call my realtor, and she says, you should call the district attorney.
Oh, so you're telling me that once you let go of that thread, you actually started getting information that allowed you to make choices and decisions that were different.
Everybody who popped into my mind, I called.
Had a solution.
Instantly.
Had information.
And not every single thread produced what I needed, but everybody who popped into my mind, everybody who I might know somebody or might know somebody who knew somebody, I called them, I asked them to call their friends, and I just tried to build this bigger network of people who wanted to help me. And when I called my realtor, she says, call the district attorney. The district attorney says, I can't really do anything, but what I can do is unseal the case file. And I said, I've never seen that. I've never seen the police report, because you don't get access to that information. Nobody does. And it's sealed because it has identifiable information on it. But once it's redacted, that's public record. And I said, please, yes. He said, give me a couple weeks and I'll get that over to you.
A couple more weeks.
Yep, but I'm, okay, somebody's doing something. And when he sends over the police report and the full case file, that's the first time I got to read what truly happened 4 years ago. And it was in that moment that any final last doubt about what happened in 2016 was gone. Because I saw the text transcript between him and the other undercover agent. And
that's all in the book.
It is.
I couldn't read that part. I just flipped through it. I tried to read it.
I do, because it's public record, so I do transcribe it in the book. It's and I had intimate relationships with the man for 10 years. I knew his preferences. I knew his stuff. And when I read it, I went, oh my God, he absolutely intended to go through with sex with an 11 and 14-year-old, because that was the ages offered. And my oldest at the time was now 9. And I just have this, and he had pictures of me at 16, and all these pieces are pulling, and I know, I get it, I see it, and I also know this is not the first time this has happened. Yeah. And he had asked to record the events, which made me realize there was likely all of that evidence that had been destroyed. But it was all there, and so no more questions. And keep in mind, at this point, I still have to send my kids back over there 4 times a week. Oh. So I'm living in complete insanity chaos, and it is just fueling me at this point.
What are you doing to take care of yourself at this point?
So I'm running every day, but at this point I lost a ton of weight right away when I first started running, and I continue to run every day. I'm focused on my work as best I can. It's a great distraction because I have a full team to manage, and every spare moment is, what can I do next? Who can I talk to? And the coworker that I had broken up with, I did start seeing again, because I needed a reprieve, a friend, a somebody. Even though that was a no-no, I didn't care anymore. And so I was doing what I needed to take care of myself. And so all of these ideas, all of this evidence stacking, I also start listening to my kids differently. Instead of being upset about their behavior, I start to realize they've been going through the same thing I have.
And they're acting out.
And they're acting out because I'm actually their safe person, and that's why they're treating me this way, because they need to know that they're loved no matter what.
And it's the outlet.
Yeah, because it's not safe to get it out with their father. Yeah. And a lot of times people don't realize when kids act out with one parent, it's not that that's always the problem parent. Sometimes that's the safe parent. Mm-hmm. And so I started to see it for what it was. I started to record the conversations with my kids.
So that's where the collecting evidence started to take place.
Yeah.
And I know that I'm probably speaking for some people who will watch this interview, who at the thought of recording, at the thought of collecting evidence is so intimidating. Mm-hmm. It stirs up so much fear that it's easier just to stay in the abusive relationship than it is to do what you did. And
yes. Yes,
so,
it is. But when it came to that or my kids being abused, it was no question. And so I don't know that I would have done it if it was just about me. But because it was about them, and I saw their innocence, and I saw the sexual grooming taking place.
And the sexual grooming, so that's a big topic in and of itself. And I know you're writing another book. And because I'm an empath, and because I sense and feel things, and I feel people's emotions, and I also feel that energy of the perpetrator. Mm-hmm. So the grooming piece is something that, can you elaborate a bit on that? Because I don't know that a lot of people understand that that's going on all the time.
Most of the time, it's not like a perpetrator sees a random kid and just goes after them. It's most of the time, the majority of actual child sexual abuse situations are with people the kid knows, whether it's the parents themselves, friends of the parents, teachers, things like that. They have some type of relationship. That's actually the majority of the cases.
Of a person of authority.
A person of authority who is established in the child's life, who is portrayed as a safe person, and then grooming is actually boundary pushing. And so you have a playful relationship with the child, it's okay to tickle them, that's innocent. And then, it moves a little bit further. You're watching videos, oh, we're not supposed to see that one, ha ha ha. The boundary pushes a little further. It's pushing those boundaries with the intent to eventually make it normalized to have inappropriate contact.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That really sums it up.
Yeah, and I saw that's what was taking place. And so I started reading books about keeping private parts private, and I started trying to empower them because I still had to send them back over there. And I didn't 100% know that I was going to succeed in my case, because the end of February of 2020 was my final divorce hearing. And so it was January of 2020 that I went to the psychic's office. It gave me 6 weeks to come up with enough evidence to fight for this.
So in enough evidence, did they quantify that, or?
Nope.
No.
No,
So
and I didn't, and the way that I ran with this was I'm leaving no stone left unturned. I need to know for myself that I have done everything and then some, because I will only fail if I stop. If I don't succeed this time, I will keep trying. And I ran with that. And we even tried to file motions to restrict at that point, which I thought were going to be successful, and then they weren't. And I had to come back and go, okay, there's something else I need. There's some other reason. I stepped into a level of trust that I had, energetic support, that I was in charge. I was driving, and so if there was a reason it didn't work yet, there was something else. And I had to trust it was gonna be okay until I found the something else and we got to the finish line. And I just kept moving. And so I got to the point where I had a 3-inch binder full of evidence, of all of the recorded conversations, of all of the things that my child had disclosed. When I was reading books about keeping bodies private or private parts private, my son says, oh, well, it's okay if they show pictures if it's animated, right? Again, more evidence. Cartoons, naked cartoons, that's okay. I got on recording that his dad had moved his bedroom to another part of the house, and that he was climbing into bed with him in his twin-size bed in the middle of the night. Again, that's boundary pushing, right? And I got all of that evidence, just stacks and stacks of all of it. And we walked into the courtroom and in February of 2020, didn't know what was coming yet, and just, okay, we're gonna present our case. And my lawyers were prepared and I was prepared, and we were gonna show how all of his therapists and probation officers were not doing anything that they were supposed to be doing. They were, completely not even following their own standards.
System failure.
And that I was a concerned mother with valid reasons. The evaluator had been brought back in to go through everything that had been happening. Her new recommendation to the court was changed, where I would have full decision making, but she still gave him a little bit of parenting time, because again, the statutes in Colorado are what they were. But at the same time, my lawyer said there was enough here that we have a very strong case. So I, again, had to trust. And that court hearing was February 28th of 2020, and it was the fight of my life. And we had the evaluator on the stand for a couple of hours going through all of his mental health diagnoses, because he had been diagnosed with dependent personality disorder, which means that he had become dependent on others to meet his mental and emotional needs, which had turned into the children. He had major depression and anxiety. He had also been diagnosed with passive aggressive personality disorder, which I didn't know existed, but he sure was that. And so all of his mental health was brought, all of the fact that he had this history of clear sex addiction that he even admitted to on some level, because he was still denying ever having relations with children at this point. And so with all of those things and all of what was playing out, was he potentially a danger to the children? Was he grooming the children? Like that was part of the court. And she kept saying, yes.
How is that
yes.
even a conversation with all of that?
Well, we have to make our case for the judge, right? So this is in front of the judge, because ultimately I still have to be okay with somebody else making the final call here. Because everything in my body says, let's pack up the kids and drive to Canada.
Yeah,
But
no kidding.
I can't do that. It's kidnapping at this point.
Yeah.
And so my lawyers successfully show that all of his support people are not doing their job. They don't certify as experts in their field of any kind.
That was a key right there.
It was a very big key.
That was a big key.
The only person who certified as an expert was the evaluator, who brought through all of the data and fully said that I acted with somebody who had the trauma I had, and I did everything that was expected of me from a psychological standpoint, and I was acting as a protective parent, and that he was not doing a single thing that the court asked him to. Because we had been asked to do parenting classes and read books, and he did not a single thing. And I did all of them and wrote the book reports, because this was about my children, right? And so then I get on the stand, and everything that can't come through her, and everything that happened in the even recent weeks has to come through me. All of the recordings, all of the things that my kids had said, while considered hearsay, established my state of mind.
Yeah.
And so my lawyer was pretty sure we were going to get them through, and she definitely wanted to hear them. I showed the judge multiple times what my son had showed me about the finger sucking thing, and I talked about him climbing into their beds and sleeping with them. I talked about all of it. And
so the level of bravery that it takes to actually have that conversation.
And I'm having this conversation with the man in the room.
In the room.
I'm facing my abuser and my child's abuser in the courtroom.
Yeah.
And
God bless you.
And I'm very careful not to look at him, and I'm looking at the judge, and I'm telling him, but I can feel all of it, and I just do everything I can to push all of that away and focus on why I am there. And I speak my part, and at the end of the day, the judge can't really make a final decision very quickly because they have to go over all the evidence, but she was appalled that he was sleeping with them, and it ordered him immediately to stop doing that, which did kind of show her hand a bit. And a few days later, I think our court was Friday, and Tuesday night the order came through.
Oh, on a Tuesday.
Tuesday night.
Imagine that.
Also happened to be the day before my 33rd birthday.
Wow.
And which was actually March 3rd. The next day was my 33rd birthday. So all of the numbers and everything.
Did we meet on March 3rd?
I have no idea.
You had a birthday.
I had a birthday, but I think it was after my birthday. Anyway.
All right, never mind.
So the order came through, and the judge basically actually took me seriously. And what she did, she immediately removed his overnights. He still got a couple of afternoon time, and she gave him 6 weeks to do a large list of things.
So this is still unsupervised time?
Yes.
Still unsupervised, still with all this evidence. See, I think that's why a lot of women don't bother going through with this, because I don't know how many people.
How do you live through that
How
over
do
and
you
over and over?
live through that?
And she had 6 weeks to comply with. He had to get a job, he had to have other evaluations, he had to do all these things. And if he completed everything in 6 weeks and sent his certificate of compliance to the court, that he would actually get the parenting plan the evaluator put in place, which gave him every other weekend unsupervised. And but no matter what, I would have full decision making. But if he didn't comply with those things, his parenting time would immediately go to supervised visits. And so she was trying to basically give him one last chance, is what she was doing. And my lawyer was a little worried about me.
So this is the dysfunctional system that believes that the right of the parent is intact, even with all of this data.
Yes, and his history, right? It wasn't like I just made this up out of nowhere. This was all of it. And my lawyer was worried about me because obviously I very much believed they were in danger, and I had this knowing that he was incapable of doing any of it. And so I knew it was just another matter of time. And I just allowed myself to take the moment where they were not going to be there overnight. They were going to just, have like 3 to 7 twice a week. It was way better than where we were. And I was just going to allow myself to have that moment. Now, what I didn't know was 2 weeks later, the pandemic was going to hit the planet and the world and shut everything down. I had no idea at that point. And I had taken my kids to Denver for spring break that year, not understanding what was happening in the world. And when I came back, we actually came back early because the hotel was shutting down. And the kids school went remote, my job went remote, everything changed. And I had this moment of, if this had not happened when it happened, they would be quarantined with him. And it was this, like, how this could not have been more divine timing. And the pandemic also made it very difficult for him to complete his list. Not that I think he ever would have done it anyway. But those 6 weeks went by, and the last time he was ever supposed to see them, he actually sent me a message saying he had a sore throat, and to take every precaution, did I want to keep them? And I said, oh, absolutely. I don't want you to see them, really. And he asked to call them on their birthdays, which are in late April. And he called both of them on their birthdays. And my son's, my oldest birthday on April was the last time we have now ever heard from him.
Can we just pause for a moment? So please carry on with where we left off.
Yes, so the last time we heard from him, and part of me knew that he was not capable. And he had another 6 weeks or so to potentially get his act together and potentially show back up, and those next 6 weeks were just reprieve. You know, the kids were home full time, I was home full time. COVID for us was a healing opportunity because all of a sudden I had my kids back without any interference. And all of a sudden we got to have fun and play in a different way. And you know, it was summer, and my job decided to give me 3 months off because the COVID pandemic put a lot of exasperation on single moms. And so for the first time ever in the US, we had paid family leave for a period of time. So I took that opportunity, and we went on road trips, and we just had fun. And when the next 6 weeks passed and he hadn't filed the certificate in compliance by then supervised visitation was the permanent parenting plan. And I didn't hear a peep from him, and nothing happened, nothing changed. And all of a sudden, it was like I kept waiting for the next shoe to drop or something and nothing was there. That was it. It was over. And you know, because of the pandemic, it offered a layer of protection and a layer of, you know, time. But I realized pretty quickly that I couldn't stay in Colorado. We were in a very small town. You know, there's 3 grocery stores. You're bound to run into somebody at some point. And I knew that I couldn't stay. And so I started to kind of feel where I wanted to go. And I really started seeking, because I succeeded at something, and I had this immense amount of gratitude just wash over me, because I trusted and I believed, and I successfully created safety for myself and my kids in a seemingly impossible situation, because the system is not set up to protect us. The system is set up only to be punitive and reactive, and the protection had to come from me, and me taking the steps, and me asking the questions, and me putting the things out there. And yes, I used the system in that way, but I had to create it. I had to start doing different.
So you had to step out of victim, recognize that you were a victim and that you were behaving like a victim, making victim choices, and then become your sovereign self.
Yes, exactly. And realizing that I did that, and I did it in a very short period of time. And what was next, I had no idea, but the world just opened up. If I can do that, I can do anything. That's how it felt. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. I wanted more connection. I wanted to understand more about the universe. Okay, if this whole spirituality thing is real, I gotta learn more. And I dived head first into everything I could get my hands on. There's a whole lot out there. And met all kinds of people, some of which are in the audience today, working, you know, learning different energy healing modalities, learning about our bodies, learning about how trauma is so connected to our physical experience, our emotional experience, everything, and seeing all of these connections. And I started to realize that I thought, you know, that only special people got this information, but I had this knowing, well, if she can talk to spirits, so can I. I just have to figure out how to do that. So that's how I operated, and so I wanted to learn more. And I just kept going in the same speed that I do. My name is Quick for a reason. And I had to absorb more, because I also realized that I went through this for a reason. And I went through it in a way that a lot of people don't come out the other side like I do. And so I had to share, and it was so loud to write a book, to be transparent about it, to talk about all of these horrible, shameful things very candidly, very openly, because it invites other people to do the same.
Thank you.
And it invites us all to go, wait, I don't have to judge myself so hard, because our trauma is really created on a very large level by our own self-judgment. The ways that we judge our experiences, even as a child victim, we blame ourselves. You know, I had a memory surface recently as I was thinking about coming on stage here, about the first time that I had a figure of authority come onto me in a sexual way. I was 13 years old, and it was a friend of my mom's who was actually picking me up from school, and his daughter was my sister's age. And he was coming on to me at 13 in my private school uniform, and him and his wife were splitting up, and she blamed me at 13. And I was no longer allowed to get rides, and I was basically told I was the problem.
And so that has just surfaced recently.
I had the reminder of it, because when I think about, you know, we take this ownership and accountability, and people say, well, what happened is, you know, when you're a child, you can't possibly think that's your fault. But even children believe that the situations that they're in are their fault.
And if I can add to that, with that trauma and with that belief, with that imprinting, we then make our choices and our decisions based on
Exactly.
that information.
Exactly.
And so then that perpetuates.
Exactly. And so it created the rest of my experiences, and it created the normalcy behind those inappropriate behaviors, which ended up in the marriage that I ended up in. And just seeing this all play out in this way, recognizing that it wasn't my fault that these experiences happened to me. And this is something that's so loud for me to share with people, that things that happen to us are not our fault. But the only person who can ever change them is us.
Yay.
And we have to choose differently. We have to see it for what it is and still take accountability for the choices we have made, while not judging ourselves for doing the very best that we could to keep ourselves safe.
Well, and you developed some very strong compensatory strategies.
Yes.
That allowed you to survive, and they worked well until the tipping point, and then now you are a healer.
Mm-hmm.
You are healed on so many levels, and yet this thing,
You still have memories, right?
stuff still shows up, and that's why it's important to have resources,
Yeah.
people to depend upon, and the experience to, or the knowing to listen to your gut instincts.
Yeah.
That's been a big life lesson for me. I have to say that my learning to trust my gut has been probably my most powerful learning over, I'll say, 30 years.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's something I had been ignoring, all of my body's responses. I had been ignoring all of that, and the moment I stopped and I followed it, everything changed. And so at this point, even when it's hard, even when the anxiety is there because you don't know what's going to happen, I know and I deeply trust that I've got me, I can do anything, and if I follow myself, I can keep going, and it will happen.
How are your children today?
Today, they are 8, almost 11, and almost 13, and they are honestly amazing. They have been through a lot, obviously. They had to go through the loss of a parent, because when he vanished, they didn't know that he was abusive either. So I had to have the disclosure conversations with them. They had to go through all of the feelings of losing somebody that they thought was their person. And that was hard, absolutely, but I am their safe person again. And you know, we've moved around a couple times, and they trust me in a way that I only remember from when they were a baby. And they know that I will do anything for them, and I will protect them, and they feel it in a very different way.
So healing is possible.
Healing is not only possible, but it is the empowered healing that the parent does that actually really is what helps the children. Because what I eventually learned is that it wasn't my kids that needed to be okay so that I was okay. I had to be okay and then my kids are okay. And the more work I do, the better they are.
I received the same counseling when I was in therapy at your age. They said to me, the best thing you can do for your children is to be healthy yourself, to take care of yourself.
And as much chaos as the world has had and the much movings and changings that we've gone through since all of that, they're more grounded in themselves because they're rooted here in safety with me.
Is there anything else that you would like to share with anyone who's listening or watching this interview that you haven't shared so far? Because I am feeling so full and so grateful to have met you. I'm so grateful to my husband for supporting me through this. Ooh, here I go. I've been so good. And my friends are all here to support you and to support this conversation. And I just think that you walk on water. I really, I'm so grateful for you and the choices you made to help humanity, not just yourself. You didn't just walk away and say, oh, okay, I'm good. You said, I'm going to help people. That's why I'm here to support you, because you made that decision to make it about humanity, not just your own circumstances. So thank you. I really admire and respect you, and I look forward to staying in touch over the decades as you move away and relocate and move further into your healing practice. God bless you. God bless your children, your husband, and thank you.
Thank you.
Cut.